a day. And we can power 100% of that with solar thermal plants in that part of the country, even if every American owns an electric car. The Midwestern part of our country is the Saudi Arabia of wind. North Dakota is the windiest place at sea level on Earth. We have enough wind in North Dakota, Montana, and Texas to provide 100% of the energy of our country, even if every American owned an electric car. The problem is, there's a number of problems. We have an administration today, and I went to a breakfast about 4 months ago with the leading members of the Obama administration, with Stephen Chu, Secretary of Energy, Ken Salazar from Interior, Lisa Jackson from the EPA, Harry Reid from the Senate, Nancy Pelosi, and the chairs of the finance committees in both houses, and as well as Al Gore and President Clinton. And we spent a couple of hours at a breakfast outlining the blueprint for the Barack Obama's energy plan. And we came out and presented it to the public, and there were 600 opinion leaders there. There was people from community groups, from all the electric utilities, from Congress, etc. And we outlined this plan, and afterwards, Carl Pope, who was the head of Sierra Club for 25 years, who was in the audience, came up to me and he said, the last time I heard people talk like that was at the Free Speech Zone at the Republican National Convention just before the police arrested them. And that demonstrated really clearly to me how, what a different approach this is, and really how wonderful in many ways this approach is. But essentially, the approach is to try to end our dependence on foreign energy, which we don't need, and to switch our dependence into help. The Obama administration faces a number of challenges in doing that. The first challenge is the huge subsidies for the incumbent. And the administration is trying to dampen the market impact, which today is the principal barrier for more efficient and cheaper forms of energy from entering the marketplace. They're trying to dampen that market advantage through the Waxman Markey bill, the cap and trade system, which is, although it has a lot of failures, that bill is absolutely critical that we pass it. If that bill passes, there's no strategic plan that will be written by any business in this country from now on, and no piece of equipment or capital expenditures made without the CEO asking, what is our carbon footprint on this boat? So it's very, very critical that we pass that bill. The second obstacle is regulatory. We have 50 public utility commissions in this country, each with one in each state, each with their own Byzantine arcane set of rules that restrict access to the grid. So we don't have a national marketplace. We have 50 different little marketplaces, and most of them don't function as markets, and most of them are governed by really perverse rules that encourage the worst kind of behavior. Free market capitalism, I'm going to talk a bit about free markets because I've always said for 25 years, I said, when people say, what's the best solution to environmental problems like global warming, I say free market capitalism, because in a true free market, you get rational behavior, and rational behavior would have us, as I'll explain in a second, is efficiency. And efficiency means the elimination of waste, and pollution is waste. But we don't have the free market is not a god. It's a tool, like a hammer. It's something that you use to build a society that you are proud of and that you believe in. And you need to align the marketplace rules with the national interest and with the interest of humanity. And in our country, we don't have that. We, in most states, including Kentucky, the way the utilities make money is by selling more energy. So that means the more power, the more coal they burn, the more money they're going to make. So no matter how green the head of that utility is, no matter how good a person he is in his heart, his shareholders want him to get his consumers to leave their lights on all night and leave the refrigerator door open. And so every morning, he's got to get up and choose between his allegiance, his duties to his shareholders, and his duties to our country. and his duties to the rest of humanity. And that's not a fair position to put that person in. So in California, they've changed the rules, and they said to the utilities, you're not going to make money by selling energy. You're going to make money by getting people to conserve energy. And this is not a radical system. It works. We actually, at RDC, one of the groups I work for, wrote that law for California, which they passed in 1982. And it's not a radical concept. In the old days, the way that before deregulation, the way that utilities made money was not by selling energy, but by building capital structures or making capital improvements. For example, the utility would say, go to the Public Utilities Commission and say, we want to build a dam. It's going to cost, we need the dam. They have to show that they needed it, there was a need. And they say, we want to build it, it's going to cost $100 million, we want to make 12% profit. And the Public Utility Commission would stamp that approved. And then they'd go ahead and they'd be able to make their guaranteed money by building infrastructure. Well, today in California, the way that the utilities make money is basically the same. Instead of making money by selling as much power as possible, Pacific Gas and Electric, or one of the other utilities, will go to the Utility Commission and say, look, we want to install LED light bulbs in 1 million homes in our distribution grid. We want to go into every home and tear out the inefficient refrigerators and replace them with a new kind of refrigerator, which uses 20% of the power. We want to change the hot water boilers in 1 million homes. And the Utility Commission stamps that, and we want to make 12 to 15% profit on our expenditure. They stamp it, and the utilities go out and do that. The utilities have become the best allies in that state for moving habits. And guess what? It's not really just it, and which is a good thing. This is what, and Californians today use 6,000 kilowatts of energy each year, whereas people from this state use about 13,000. That makes Californians more competitive than any other state. They use half the national average in kilowatt hours per year of any other state. And it's because they were able, California has had, since 1980, it's at 96% economic growth, and it has had no growth, zero growth, in the amount of energy that they use. So that's one of the issues that we have. It's a regulatory issue. We also need to open up the grid. President Obama has to say to all the utilities, you've got to open up your grid to everybody in the country. And so that if I have my house, my home in Mount Kisco, New York, is really a power plant. I have a solar system on the roof, and it's powered by geothermal, and my home is producing more energy most of the day than it's using. Well, I ought to be able to sell that energy back to the grid and get market rates for it. Today, there's no state. Today, there's no state where you can do that. There's many states, there's 36 states that will allow where the utilities will buy some of the energy back. None of them will buy all of it. And none of them will give you market rates for it. And that's wrong. We should have a marketplace and let free market capitalism save our country from global warming. We have, I guess the other thing that the utilities, well, here's the other issue. The biggest issue is the infrastructure issue. We don't have in our country an electric grid that can carry all of these new currents of power. Every farmer in North Dakota, virtually, wants to put wind turbines on his farm. And what will that do? He can generate huge amounts of wealth from each of those turbines. He can keep his family farm. He can help regenerate the local rural economies, which are collapsing all over the country. And there's huge amounts of capital deployed by the biggest corporations on the planet, General Electric, Siemens, Vestas, and private individuals like Warren Buffett and T. Boone Pickens, and many, many others who want to pay to put those turbines on his property. Unfortunately, we don't have a power grid that can carry the electrons from North Dakota to marketplaces like St. Louis or New Orleans or New York City. The electricity, the grid is underbuilt in this country, and it's overutilized, so it simply can't carry those electrons. The Texas wind farm owner who wants to sell in his electrons in New Orleans can't do it because the electrons will diffuse before they cross the Texas border. We simply cannot do long-haul transmission of energy in this country. In Europe, they can do it. In parts of California and Canada, they have installed new high-tension wires that can do this. The technology is there. You know, some of it, there's some technology very old, it's bigger copper wires or DC grids, but there's also modern technology that can do it very, very efficiently. But we're not using them yet, and we need to rebuild a grid, and we need to rebuild a smart grid to do it, you know, the same thing that Eisenhower did during the 1950s when we built the national highway system in this country and connected all the states to a national highway system. It was a national security issue. And we need to do the same thing. We need to build a smart grid that can intelligently store and deploy solar energy at night, wind energy during the doldrums, reach into everybody's home and manipulate their, you know, turn off appliances when they're being used wastefully, and we can do these extraordinary things with the grid today. And we need to build that nationally to carry these new currents of energy around the country and create it on the national marketplace. We have the money to do it, both in the stimulus package, but more importantly, the utilities themselves have already budgeted $1.5 to $2 trillion for electricity transmission over the next 15 to 20 years. And what we need is the Obama administration to tell those utilities, give them a blueprint for how to spend that money that's already out there. You know, the same way that we did with the highway program in the 50s, where Eisenhower would say to the local Department of Transportation, for example, Alabama, when you build your section of highway, make sure it connects to Georgia on one, you know, the east and Mississippi on the west, so that we're all working off of one blueprint. And if we do that, we can create a marketplace that does what a marketplace is supposed to do, which is to reward good behavior, which is efficiency, and to punish bad behavior, which is inefficiency and waste. Today, we have a marketplace that is absolutely rigged to reward the dirtiest, filthiest, most poisonous, most dangerous, most destructive fuels from hell, instead of the clean, green, abundant, safe, and healthy fuels from heaven. And we need to change it. If we create that kind of marketplace, every American all of a sudden becomes an energy entrepreneur. I can sell now my solar power, my excess solar power onto the grid. Every American becomes an energy entrepreneur. Every home becomes a power plant. And we power this country based on American entrepreneurship and energy and initiative and what Franklin Roosevelt said on American industrial genius, rather than Saudi oil. And that's the direction that we ought to be going in. I'm on the board of the biggest green tech venture capital firm in our country. It's called Vantage Point. It's a Silicon Valley firm, and it has about $4.6 billion deployed in that space, largely in that space, in the green tech space. But it's got about almost 40 companies, and I'm on the board of a number of those companies. And one of those is a company called BrightSource, which builds solar thermal plants, which is not the same as solar voltaics, which you put on your roof. A solar thermal plant is a mirror farm in the desert. You build a scaffolding and you put on top, you suspend in the scaffolding a turbine, the same as you find in a coal plant or a nuke plant. And then you surround it with concentric rings, giant mirrors, which are manipulated by computers to reflect sunlight all day long onto that turbine. 20 minutes after the sun rises in the morning, that turbine is at 750 degrees, which is as hot as it ever gets at a coal plant or a nuke plant. It's a very efficient way to generate energy. Now, to build that plant, we're building the biggest one in the country, and the biggest plant in the world. It's 2.6 gigawatts of power from one series of plants that are all tucked in together. We're building it cheaper, about the same, almost exactly the same as you can build a coal plant, about $3 billion a gigawatt. We're building it about half to a third the price of what you pay for a nuke plant. But once we build our plant, the energy is free forever.
Once you build a coal plant, which costs you the same, the big costs are just beginning. Because now you've got to go cut down the Appalachian Mountains. And shipping across the country on rail cars. And you've got to, and like, you know, let me tell you something about coal is that, you know, I was in West Virginia last year for 6.5 weeks. I had a jury trial in West Virginia, and I won in the end, the biggest jury verdict in the history of the state. I've been fighting the coal industry in West Virginia, mountaintop removal coal industry, let me put it that way, for many, many years. And as I flew out of the state, I had to go down to West Virginia a few weeks ago to argue the appeal in the Supreme Court. And as we were leaving the state, I was driving on a highway that felt like I was driving on a carpet. And I talked to the driver of the car about it. I said, well, why does this highway feel so cool to drive on? He said, because there's 22 inches of asphalt on it. Well, the Mass Pike only has 4 inches of asphalt. So why does it have 22 inches? Because that's what the coal industry needs for its overweight coal trucks and overloaded coal trucks. But it's not the coal industry that's paying for that highway, and that asphalt costs millions of dollars per inch per mile. It's the taxpayers. A few minutes ago, somebody said, well, this university is powered by coal. And the reason it's powered by coal is it's so cheap, because it's only 5 cents a kilowatt. But the reason it's so cheap, it's not really cheap. It's really expensive. It's just that somebody else is paying the cost. And that's how the coal industry operates. How in a true free market system, the coal industry would have to absorb the cost of that highway. That's one of their costs of doing business. Nobody else needs 22 inches. It's just them, so they ought to pay for the whole thing. The reason that we can't have high-speed rail in this country is because the coal gondolas are so heavy that they warp the tracks and make it dangerous to run the rail, passenger rails very fast on those tracks. That's one of the costs of coal that you don't see at this university when you pay 5 cents a kilowatt. But it's still a cost the rest of our country is paying. The lack of convenience and economic damage to our country. This week, the front page of the New York Times had a story that showed that children in Charleston, West Virginia, virtually all the children in Charleston, have had the enamel eaten off of their teeth from drinking the water, the city water supply, because it's contaminated with chemicals from the coal slurries that have been injected into the ground or have simply leached there. Those chemicals don't just take the enamel off your teeth. They cause cancer. They're carcinogenic, they're mutagenic, they're teratogenic, they're endocrine disruptors that cause bizarre and terrible changes in sexual development in those kids. They are known to cause permanent IQ loss in those children. So that's one of the costs of coal that you're not measuring when you pay 5 cents a kilowatt. Those kids. The New York Times reported on a national EPA study that showed that every fish in America is now contaminated with dangerous levels of mercury. Let me repeat that. Every single freshwater fish caught in this country now has dangerous levels of mercury. There's no safe level of mercury. And according to the CDC, 1 out of every 6 American women has dangerous levels of mercury in her womb. I had my levels tested recently. My levels are 2.5 times what EPA considers safe just from eating fish. I was told by Dr. David Carpenter, who is the National Authority on Mercury Contamination, that a woman with my levels of mercury in her blood would have children with cognitive impairment, permanent brain damage. And I said, what do you mean she might have? And he said, no, the science is very certain. Her children have some level of permanent neurological injury. He said he estimated at my levels probably a permanent IQ loss in those kids of about 5 to 7 points. Well, today, according to the CDC, there are 640,000 children born in this country every year who've been exposed to dangerous levels of mercury in their mother's womb.
Well, this is one of the costs of coal.